Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina McHale, and thank you for participating in today's 720th Justice Clearinghouse Webinar. During today's webinar, retired Captain Fritz Reber, Captain Greg Goreck, and Lieutenant Don Redmond are here to talk about live streaming 911 calls directly to first responders, improving situational awareness and response times. New technology that securely live streams 911 emergency calls directly to officers in the field is making an impact on the public safety of communities across the country. Patrol officers can monitor incoming 911 calls in real time for their immediate area, allowing first responders to hear the caller's urgency and small details that may not necessarily be added into the CAD system, as well as identify on a map the caller's precise location prior to the call for service has been dispatched. The current national conversation is focusing on how officers can make better decisions and improve de-escalation skills. Live 911 is law enforcement's potential game changer for responding to 911 calls. Our speakers today are Captain Fritz Reber, Captain Greg Goreck, and Lieutenant Don Redmond. Captain Greg Goreck started working for Polk County Sheriff's Office 25 years ago. During his tenure, he has served in patrol, canine, investigations, special operations, traffic, homicide, and honor guard. Captain Goreck is currently the commander over the Southeast District. Captain Don Redmond began his law enforcement career with the Chula Vista Police Department in 1996. During his 24 years in law enforcement, Captain Redmond has worked in a variety of assignments, including patrol, traffic, SWAT, professional standards, watch commander, community policing commander, emergency 911 communications center manager, and jail commander. Currently, Captain Redmond oversees the UAS drone program and special operations. William Fritz Reber retired as a captain from the Chula Vista Police Department in May of 2018. He has 27 years of law enforcement experience, leaving the San Diego area agency as the Patrol Operations Commander, the #2 position in the department. Live 911 is the innovative technology resulting from his vision for closing the gap between call taker to first responder by allowing officers to immediately hear incoming 911 emergency calls in their geographical area. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our friends and partners for helping with today's webinar. Today's webinar is done in partnership with the National Sheriff's Association and Live 911. We truly appreciate working with organizations like the NSA and Live 911 who are so committed to enhancing and growing the profession. And now briefly before we begin, I'd like to share with you some information about the Justice Clearinghouse. The Justice Clearinghouse is the only peer-to-peer educational program for justice professionals that emphasizes the multidisciplinary nature of an effective justice system. Through our year-round virtual conference, our audience and subscribers begin to develop a comprehensive understanding of the justice system while breaking down its many misconceptions. While our events are free to attend live, our subscribers receive 24/7 access to over 700 recorded webinars and are eligible to receive certificates of attendance that can be used when seeking continuing education credits. So if you're not presently a subscriber, I would invite you to join today and support our work. The last thing I want to address with everybody are some basic housekeeping items. First, this event is being recorded and the formal presentation is scheduled to last about 60 minutes and will be available to subscribers on the Justice Clearinghouse website. Second, this is a listen-only event, but you can type as many questions as you have in the GoToWebinar toolbar. We'll take as many of your questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Next, if you do experience audio issues during your webinar day, such as the audio cutting in and out intermittently, consider dialing in using the phone number that was included in your email invite. After you dial in, when the system asks you for a PIN, you can simply bypass that by hitting the pound key. And on that note, our speaker has provided a handout or has provided a video during today's webinar, so the audio can only be streamed through your computer speakers and won't be audible while you're using a phone connection. And as always, we love learning about our Justice Clearinghouse audiences, and so today I'd like to ask a new question. What time zone are y'all in? Your options are Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, or other. And we'll give everybody just a few seconds to get your votes in. We love learning more about where you guys are all at and how you're experiencing the webinar today. Wow, you guys are doing fantastic. And I know the guys have a huge program planned for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling and share the results. Interesting. 35% of you said Eastern, 28% of you said Central, 11% said Mountain, 24% of you are on the Pacific time zone with me, and 2% are somewhere else. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for doing that. And finally, after today's webinar, there will be a follow-up survey, and we do ask that you complete it because just like that polling question, your feedback helps us shape everything that we do here at Justice Clearinghouse. And so with that, let's turn our presentation over to our instructors for the day. Welcome, guys. Fritz, it's all yours.
Thanks, Christina. I really appreciate the intro. I also want to thank the National Sheriff's Association and, of course, Higher Ground for giving us this opportunity to tell everyone out there about Live911. Obviously, I appreciate everyone tuning in, and hopefully this is an informative hour. Certainly proud to be talking with Captain Don Redmond and Captain Greg Goreck. But I'll start us off. We're going to kind of go in chronological order about how this developed, and then obviously you'll hear about how people are using it and how it's adding value every day by the two captains that are still serving their communities. I think it's important for me to start with, spend about the first 10 minutes or so starting about how the idea developed. As you're hearing this information, you're hearing the idea, it's going to seem pretty intuitive. You're going to wonder if it hadn't already been thought of before or why it already wasn't in place. Those are the best kind of ideas, and usually people dismiss them because if it's not here already, maybe it wasn't a good idea, or it hit a wall that no one anticipated. And of course, that was my idea my thoughts when I first thought of this idea. But as you hear how it developed and the unique circumstances and the people that were involved and the agency that was involved and the leadership there, you'll understand why it's just not something that was going to come out of any. This was the perfect time for this to be developed. Everything is kind of fit in place. So I also want to say I know there's a large dispatch audience out there, and to be honest, this tool really wasn't developed with dispatchers in mind. We were thinking that dispatchers would not really notice it, maybe integrate it into their operations. We were hoping it wouldn't impact existing operations at all, and it was mostly for the first responders out in the field to be able to get more information, get a jump on the information, and just kind of happen passively. What we found is dispatchers, at first were kind of afraid of change, but the ones that have used it have really embraced it. It's actually changed their operation. It really has built a bridge between the end users, and Don Redmond and I think Greg will go more into this down the road. Just going back where the idea came from, I was a dispatch manager at the Chula Vista Police Department, managing dispatch as a lieutenant. I had never even heard of the term PSAP before, so when I got there, it was a whole new discipline to learn for me. And I think you'll find that a lot of officers that are out there working on the streets right now really have no understanding of how dispatch works and what the great work that dispatchers and comm center professionals are doing every day. And that's kind of a side benefit of this. It's a window into their world, and it's a mutual respect for a discipline that they really didn't understand before. But I would be listening to, as a new manager, I wanted to hear how my employees were doing. And of course, as most of you know, that there's 911 centers have a call logger, and there's a monitor client or a little software app that gave you the ability to listen in on how your dispatchers were doing, answering radio calls, or 911 calls. So I would spend my time listening to that, and I'd hear so much information over a 911 call. And thinking as a cop who had worked the streets for a lot of years, I thought that this would be incredible to have this somehow piped into the car in real time, so I could adjust, your response to it, pre-plan tactics, obviously start driving in that location before it got through CAD. So as you know, a call taker will get the 911 call, enter the information into CAD, send it over to radio. That takes some time, and be able to get ahead of that and what I call bridge that 911 gap, I thought would really be a value add to everyday operations. And I would hear the call come out over the radio and also the 911 call, and I'd realize a lot of times there's a big gap between the impression you get of what's going on based on the 911 call and hearing just what the radio dispatcher put out. And that's just the normal feature of that, the game of telephone, where you have the time delay and data decay as it moves from 911 caller to call taker over to radio dispatcher. So, you know, I kind of played around with how that practically could happen. I went to command college as right before I made captain, and wrote a paper on it and had a focus group to discuss some of the benefits and risks and the downsides. And so we really evaluated this in theory, wrote the paper, and it got published in Police Chief magazine. Then during my time in the drone world, and you'll hear more about the Chula Vista Police Department's Drone as First Responder program. That was something as a captain, as a UAS commander, myself and others kind of developed, where we were sending drones out ahead of ground units, trying to get on scene and eyes on before the ground units got there, so they'd have better situational awareness when they arrived. And it was a perfect opportunity to integrate that and test that. And so giving that DFR pilot, that drone as first responder pilot, the ability to hear the 911 call in real time, really, you know, added value to. It was a way for them to get a jump, because the drone could respond to something in 2 minutes. If you got a minute jump on it, they could really shorten the response time. But it was also a way to test it without having it in patrol cars, because people were concerned about how officers might react, and how, you know, emotionally hearing these calls coming in, how is it going to interact with dispatch. So it was a perfect test bed for it. So I won't go too much more into how it works in operation, but that's kind of lets you know how it progressed. In the drone world, I met Higher Ground, and you know, I was talking to some people and telling them about this idea, and they said, I know exactly the company you need to call. So I reached out to Higher Ground, got a hold of Terry Ryan, who's the CEO, and the vice president, Tom Goodwin, and they met with me and heard the idea and instantly realized it was a product that they had to make, and they were able to make it. They're a company that they make logger systems. They make Capture 911 for PSAP centers, so they know the industry, they know the product, and they were visionaries, and they were able to understand the vision and have the software engineers and the team to actually put it together. So they currently have 1,800 customers, and so it's a perfect opportunity to get this product out to existing customers. So just to reiterate how it operates and the value it adds. So it allows first responders to hear the call in 911 call in real time. They can hear the updates while they're driving to the call. It's also integrated with Rapid SOS, so that while they're driving, they can see exactly where that 911 caller is standing. They see a little blue dot on a map. It's a map user interface. It sits on their CAD system, on their MDC inside their car. It's not integrated with CAD, so it's a standalone system. They just they look at the map and listen to the incoming calls, much like you'd be scanning other frequencies, radio frequencies. But you just hear these 911 calls come in, and you'd hear the caller taker say, 911, how can I help you? And the caller would start explaining the nature of the emergency, their location, giving all the details to the call taker. And with officers having this information, instead of making a left turn or a right turn or random, they can actually turn towards the location of the emergency, moving closer, hearing updates, getting real-time information, so that they'd have a better idea upon arrival of what the situation is. It would also not only let them understand the nature of the emergency, but you'd hear all kinds of stuff in the background, the tone of voice of the caller, the sense of urgency in the caller or lack of urgency. So it was a perfect way to get every bit of information that's possible, because there's really no way to get more information than hearing the caller themselves. And we'll move to the next slide. There's a couple of incidents that real life incidents that, when I was researching this idea and developing it with Higher Ground, really shined a light on how it can change and outcomes can be you know, made better. The first one obviously is the Tamir Rice shooting, and it was a tragic incident in Cleveland back in 2014. A caller from a park called dispatch and said, you know, I'm in the park. There's someone that looks like a juvenile. They have something that might be a toy gun, but they're pointing it at people, they're scaring people. You might want to have some people come and check it out. And through the necessary process of dispatch, and certainly from dispatchers who don't want to put out non-factual information, the call came out more of as a person with a gun in the park, and the officers responded tactically more like, the situation was a serious one, where had they heard the lack of urgency in the caller's voice, the fact that no one was in trouble, the caller believing that the person was a juvenile, believing the gun was a toy, might have changed their response, allowed them more time to respond and think differently, and had a different and less tragic outcome. Another incident was a famous one where a Harvard professor was attempting to enter his own home. A caller had called and started to describe what they were seeing, but they didn't think it was a crime. The dispatcher was hearing something different than the call taker was trying to relay. The dispatcher entered it in as a possible burglary in progress. And the information, the tone of voice, the lack of urgency, and some of that hesitation on part of the caller didn't get translated to the officers. And when they responded, they detained the professor. It became a national, if not international, incident, and really was not the best outcome for a situation that was not really a crime. So having access to all that information, having access to that content would have changed outcomes. And I think in this day and age, when officers, call taking is responding to calls and doing it better is a high priority. And certainly the more information, the better in terms of how you respond and how outcomes affect the results. The idea of getting streaming 911 is more important than ever. So I kind of set you up there and let you know how it was developed. And at this point, you get into the fun stuff where you hear actually how it's working and how people are using it, and real life examples of how it's adding value. So I'll hand it over to Captain Don Redmond from the Chula Vista Police Department.
Thanks, Fritz. I'm Captain Don Redmond. I am a captain, not a lieutenant. I was promoted about a week and a half ago, so that's kind of why you're hearing me as a lieutenant and as a captain. But I am a captain, and I've been involved in Live911 from the beginning. A little bit about background about our department and our city. So Chula Vista, if you don't know where that is, we are in San Diego, California, San Diego County. We're just south of San Diego, about 8 miles north of the Mexican Tijuana border. We're the second largest city in our county. We have no police helicopters or anything of that nature. We've just been approved for 270 sworn officers. So we're kind of a medium-sized department. We're not too big and we're not too small. So in the development of Live911, we were really the best sized department, and hopefully we can address some of the issues for smaller departments and also larger departments as in the development. So Chula Vista, we are one of the lowest per capita for officers in our area. We're about one officer for every 100,000. So we're one of the lowest. We're the lowest in our county, one of the lowest in the state. So where we've always looked to is towards technology and to kind of how do we do our job better. Even though we're so under manpower compared to other agencies, in the last few years, we were ranked at 1.8 safest city in the country for a city that is our size. So we've been able to really use our resources the best that we can, and we've looked towards technology as one of those things. For us, we have a growth management commission that dictates how quickly we are to respond to priority 1 calls, which is immediate life in danger, or emergency calls, priority 2 calls, within approximately 6 minutes for priority 1s, 12 minutes for priority 2s. And because we are so low staffed, it's been very difficult for us to meet those standards in the past years. So with that in mind, we wanted to look at different ways that how do we get our officers on scene quicker, because as you can imagine, every second counts during an emergency. So when Fritz and Higher Ground came to us, the Chula Vista Police Department, after Fritz had retired, I was the manager of our 911 communication center. Fritz approached us with Higher Ground and said, hey, we'd like to see if Chula Vista would be willing to partner with Higher Ground to develop software to live stream 911 calls directly to the officers in the field. We thought this was an outstanding idea. One in which we recognize could help our response times, but also we recognize the national message that law enforcement needs to look at things differently. How do we approach calls for service, and different de-escalation tools. So we thought this was a perfect opportunity to do so. So we started working on it. We rolled out. We didn't roll it out to patrol for about 8 months. We slowly rolled it out to our drone program, which I'll get to in a second, and then finally for our full patrol base. What originally came out as the live streaming of the 911 calls was extremely important, but what actually for the officers, hearing the 911 call was absolutely important, but the other part of it was the location of the 911 caller. So when we first rolled this out, Higher Ground was not integrated, or Live911 was not integrated with Rapid SOS. So it was really the generic cell phone towers trying to get the location. So that was really vague, and that really didn't work for officers to be able to hear the different locations. But once we integrated with Rapid SOS, it was a huge game changer for the software and for the officers in the field. So most dispatchers, I hope, are aware of the Rapid SOS integration, but where officers have never had this opportunity to see the exact location of a caller. When you think about it, a lot of times we get calls at a parking lot on a weekend to meet the caller there, and the officer rolls into the parking lot on a busy weekend, and it takes them a few minutes to even find the location. But now through Rapid SOS, they're able to see it. So the looking at the really kind of the secret sauce of Live911 is that the officer is able to geofence the location. So they're not hearing every single call for service that comes into the PSAP. So Chula Vista, we get about 100,000 911 calls every year. Obviously, we don't want a patrol officer to have to listen to 100,000 911 calls. That would be too much. So they're able to set up a geofence, and what we recommend is that they set up a geofence around their patrol vehicle. Maybe it's only about a half mile or a quarter mile, and they're only hearing 911 calls within their immediate area. So if they're driving by a bank or a supermarket or something and a 911 call comes in, they can immediately see that location. But if you're a supervisor or a watch commander, maybe you want to hear all of the calls for service in the city, so you can expand your radius and your geofence so that you can hear all of the calls. So we've had a couple of these examples where we had one officer, actually two officers following each other, going to just a trespassing call. It was nothing real urgent call, and a 911 call comes in that a business owner, somebody had broken into his business, and he had taken the suspect at gunpoint in their parking lot. The suspect tried to run away. The business owner grabbed a gun and was pointing his gun at the suspect in the parking lot. The officer said he heard the 911 call and literally looked across the street as he's driving by and saw them, and immediately made a U-turn. Both officers took the suspect into custody, and they were on scene, putting them in handcuffs before the dispatcher even knew there was a call for service. We also had another call of a mom who said her adult son was breaking into her house. He had a gun and a hammer and was actively trying to break in the door. Our dispatcher sent a call, man with a gun trying to break in a house, and was asking for all these units to respond there, lights and sirens. But the officers were monitoring Live911, and they heard the mom was real vague about the gun. When the dispatcher was questioning her, she said, well, I never saw a gun, but you guys take forever to get here, so I need you guys here now. and then actually heard the mom say that the son was putting the hammer back in his car and was back at the door, was unarmed. The officers were actively listening to Live911 down the street. As soon as they heard that he put the hammer away, they made their approach. No guns drawn. There was actually no crime had been committed. It was basically a civil issue. And we found that was a huge example of a de-escalation tool. So we get a lot of questions about how does this affect our dispatchers? When we first rolled it out, we had a number of questions from our dispatchers. They ranked from, are officers going to be second guessing them? Are they going to be, is Live911 going to be a tool, a discipline tool where dispatchers are going to be getting in trouble? Are officers going to be excited and crash their cars because they're hearing somebody screaming on the Live911? There are all these questions that came out, and what we found is really a lot of times the exact opposite happened. So we recognize that when a call comes into a dispatch center, you have a call taker who is trying to get the information. They enter it into the CAD. The CAD gets routed over to our dispatcher, and then the dispatcher, who's, if they're not dispatching another call because they're only dispatching one at a time, they get that call and they send it out. So what we found is a lot of times the officers are hearing everything before the actual primary dispatcher is getting it, and the officers recognize that the dispatcher may not have it. So a lot of times they'll be monitoring Live911 and they'll say, I copy, the white car is fleeing northbound on Broadway. So they're actually airing the information directly as soon as they hear it, before the dispatcher even has received that information, so that the dispatcher does not have to air that information, but also it's more in real time. We've also had situations where the dispatcher, I'm sorry, the call taker has entered the incorrect address. They may have put it down as Palomar instead of East Palomar, where in two situations specifically, we had officers running code 3 to the wrong address, but somebody, an officer got on the air and said, nope, that's not what they said. They said it was in the other direction, and they corrected them on the air, which was great because we immediately stopped the response to that location and sent them to the other location. So with all of these, anytime that we can be more efficient as a, not only as a police department, but within our dispatch center, obviously we want to look at all these, this technology. So as Fritz had said earlier, the call taker is trying to enter as much information as possible. Sometimes the caller is frantic, sometimes it's vague, sometimes they're confused. The call taker is entering as much information, but realistically, they're not dictating exactly what the caller is saying. So it's a synopsis that is entered into CAD. The dispatcher is now reading the CAD and is given another synopsis of what the actual call for service is. So when we looked at Live911 and kind of talking to our dispatchers, they have felt it is actually lessen the stress of them getting all this information, especially on a hot call where there's a lot of information coming at the same time. They're trying to enter all of the main important topics, and they're afraid that they're going to miss something, where now we hear the officers are getting all the information. Some of the questions that I've gotten from other agencies is it too much information for the officers? Do the officers let their emotions get the best of them? To which we found that is not the case, because whenever an officer makes that final turn onto a call for service, we want to make sure that that officer has every bit of information prior to them arriving on scene. We don't want a synopsis of a synopsis. We want them to have all of the information. And if they're hearing something on Live911 that is affecting them emotionally, our officers are professionals. They're able to control their emotions, and if they're hearing something on Live911 that is getting them too emotional, they're probably not going to be long for this profession, because they're dealing with emotions all day long in their job. So the idea that officers don't want to hear it really isn't the case. Our officers have said very much that they want to hear all of the information, and they want to hear the tone of voice, just like Fritz had pointed out with the Tamir Rice, where the caller was very calm, wasn't an active shooter or anything, but when it was dispatched differently. We'll go to the next slide. So for our communication center, it has actually changed to where our dispatchers are now highly suggested that they all log into Live911 themselves, which is kind of a weird thought. When we were first using Live911, we thought, well, why in the world would a dispatcher need Live911? And as this has progressed over the year, the Live911 has been a very good tool for our dispatchers. So each dispatcher, when they come on, they log into Live911, and through the app, they are able to, or through the software, listen to only their station, their console. So they're only getting the 911 calls that come into their station. They mute it, so they're not hearing this information. They're not getting any feedback. But what's good for them is on the map, they are instantly getting the caller location through the Rapid SOS portal. So prior to Live911, if a caller did not know their location, the dispatcher would have to open up the Rapid SOS website, enter in a phone number, and then get that phone number or get that location to see where they're calling from. Now they're instantly getting it on the map exactly where they're at. Additionally, on the map, they can see all of the officers' locations on the map in relations to the call, and they can actively see if the officers are actively listening to the 911 call, or if it's outside their geofence and they're not listening to it. So we have seen that the dispatchers will get the 911 call. I'm sure all of you dispatchers are out there have occasionally gotten the call where they want an officer, they're screaming, I just want to talk to an officer, and the dispatcher is able to say, sir, ma'am, the officer is listening to us now. What is it that what's going on? And the community really has a sense of connection to the officers, because now they're speaking to the officer directly in the field. It's one way, they're only hearing, the officer's hearing everything, so they can't, there's no exchange of information, but the officer is hearing it directly, so it kind of calms down the caller and connects them to it. We had this where a caller called in and she was screaming. It was a drowning call, which as you can imagine, this is one of the most terrifying calls for anybody to receive. The person who was calling couldn't even give us the address or really what was going on, only saying that there was a drowning. Our officers saw immediately what the location was because it popped up on the Live911 map, and they knew it was a drowning. They didn't need any other information, and they were en route code 3 and were there within minutes. And the call was never, before the call was even entered into CAD, so we were there pretty quickly. So how we rolled this in, so Chula Vista Police Department, we have a drone as a first responder. So if you can imagine, we have, we're partnered with the San Diego IPP, the Integration Pilot Program, and how do we use drones in public safety. So we're the first organization, police department in the entire country to have drones nesting throughout the city. And essentially, anytime there is a call for service where we feel aerial footage could be used, we can launch a drone within a 3 nautical mile of the launch location and live stream information, that video straight to the officers and dispatchers in real time. So a lot of times we are able to get overhead within 90 seconds of a call coming in. So this was a perfect opportunity for us to beta test Live911. So our officers, our teleoperator who's flying the drone before was just monitoring CAD. So obviously there were a couple of minutes delay by the time a call would pop up on CAD. Now they hear a 911 call, they know the location, they immediately launch, and many times from the time that 911 call comes in to the time we are overhead actively streaming video, maybe of a suspect fleeing or a fight or something of that nature, is within 90 seconds, which is huge for for our department, and seeing how to resolve these situations. Go one more. So just a quick how we use this is we currently have 2 locations in our city that cover 33% of our geographical location, but it's 70% of our calls for service. We launch 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, so from 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We have a teleoperator, which is a police officer who is at the station, who is monitoring, and at any point he can launch one of 2 drones or both drones, depending on where the call is, to get overhead and live stream videos directly to the first responders, including our fire department. So if there's a fire or something of that nature. So when we couple the live 911, so the officers hearing the 911 calls coming in, and then you put the live video feed. So now we have our dispatchers who are seeing the video feed within 90 seconds. They're talking to somebody on 911. They're seeing the video footage of where the person is, the situational awareness. So the dispatcher kind of now understands what's going on, and the officers hearing the information directly from the caller. It has really been full circle on bringing our community, the officer, and the dispatchers all together as in a team effort to resolve these situations. And I'll turn this over to Greg now.
Well, thank you, Don. I appreciate it. And Fritz, you guys have covered a lot of information. And my portion of the presentation is basically going to be talking from the perspective of an agency who has recently acquired Live 911 and has started rolling it out to the troops in the field, the deputy sheriffs, and what we've done. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and our agency. Again, I'm Captain Greg Goreck, Polk County Sheriff's Office. Been there rolled up in a quarter century. It seems just like yesterday I was getting sworn in. Polk County is located in Central Florida. We are what's called the I-4 corridor. We're located between Orlando and Tampa, so we get a lot of traffic from those vacation destinations. We are the 4th largest county in the state of Florida. We have a jurisdiction of over 2,000 square miles. We actually have 15 municipalities, 6 of which that are contracted with the Sheriff's Office to provide police services. So not only are we your typical full-service Sheriff's Office role, but we also deal with city issues and the confines of the jurisdictions that they have. We are divided up into 2 divisions with 5 districts total. I am the commander over our Southeast district. So if you're looking at the map on PowerPoint, I've got pretty much that whole lower right corner of the county is under my span of control. We have about 1,600 employees, 800 of them are sworn, and we average about a little over 280,000 calls a year for service. At least I was back in 2019. Next slide. The Polk County Sheriff's Office, very fortunate. Our sheriff, Grady Judd, is very proactive when it comes to technology. He always has been. Similar to Don's situation, we have a lot of jurisdiction and not enough police officers go around. I think that's pretty much the story for all law enforcement agencies. We do more with less, especially in today's climate. So you can either, embrace technology, or it's just going to be harder. And we've always looked at technology as a way of, making this job a little easier and a better way to serve the public. We originally started off with a program called ProCap. It stands for Proactive Community Attack on Problems. This kind of mirrors CompStat from New York, where we have data analysts compile information, and then we try to predict, who's committing these crimes or where crimes are going to occur, so we can eliminate the trends and then move on and get the best amount of effort for our resources. We couple that with problem-oriented policing, and again, that's where we, put the resources where they need to be. We were able to, have a decreased crime index of 5.8% from 2018 and 2019. And right now we're celebrating a 40-year crime low. Each year we have been able to lower our crime rate, and we're sitting right now, 40 years ago we had a higher crime rate than we did now, and it's just through embracing technology and again trying to recognize these things that we can do to make this job a little better. The bottom portion of that slide I really have to kind of explain, and it says that we want to get back to Mulberry 1972. Now, let me explain what Mulberry is. Mulberry is a very small municipality within our jurisdiction. And my sheriff, he has worked himself up through the ranks. He started in a radio room, as what you call a dispatcher. up until he's been for the past 16 years our sheriff, and he's worked himself through up every rank, and he takes great pride in that, and we do too, because we understand that he knows how this job is done, and he understands the trials and tribulations we face. So he always equates, he goes, listen, when I was a deputy sheriff, I would roll into the Mulberry police station at the time, and I would hear the dispatcher, I'd hear the phone ring, they would pick up the phone, and then they take the information, I go, hold on just a second, and they would click the button on the radio and they would dispatch the unit. He goes, that's where we need to get back to. You know, we have to be able to, as soon as possible, get that information from the caller and get it to the deputy. And that's always kind of been his edict, is let's get back to Mulberry in 1972. Now, we can't do that, obviously, with as many calls that come into our emergency communication centers nationwide. You've got to have call takers. You got to have people screening the calls. You can't just have direct access to dispatchers. So how do we do that? Well, Live911 is that answer. It enables, just like Fritz and just like Captain Redmond said, it enables the officer on the street to get that information as soon as possible. They're able to hear the call within seconds of it coming in, and they can all go what we call self-dispatch. They hear it and they start rolling in that direction. I kind of coined this phrase with my folks. I said, listen, Live911 allows you to be proactive in responding to emergency calls, not reactive. You're not having to wait for somebody to get the information and dispatch it to you. You're hearing it, you're making decisions, you're responding based on the information you're hearing. It's about as reactive as you can get without actually being in the comm center. As mentioned, we are a very large agency, both population-wise and as well as geography-wise. We have a lot of territory to cover. We decided to take the largest district, which is my patrol district, and that's where we implemented the beta test. We didn't do it halfway. We implemented on every platoon, everybody from the rank of lieutenant down, our platoon leaders are lieutenants, and every member, including our contract cities, our canines, our crime suppression teams, would have access to Live911. As Don explained, you know, you have the geofence radius that you can implement around the patrol car, around the unit, and you can set a mile distance in any 911 calls that came in. Based on how our jurisdiction is laid out in our districts, as well as the intertwined municipalities, you know, we worked with Higher Ground to see if we could kind of redefine that geofencing to fit our patrol sectors, and they were able to oblige. So we were actually able to create geofencing that wasn't circular by radius, but actually defined the parameters of our sectors, so that, or even our districts, so that units in those particular areas would only receive the 911 calls that are in those areas. And we've really seen, and for the law enforcement folks that are listening, you know, it's really hard sometimes to get cops, especially older cops, interested in technology. And I've had several of them of 15, 20 years experience coming in my office and telling me, I really see the benefit in this. I really like it. It's really helped out. And they're telling me their war stories. They're telling me how, you know, they went to this call, and, you know, even as the captain, I have the luxury of being able to beta test it, and I hear it. And even when I'm out in the field, I'm going to these calls and I'm hearing them come in. But it's very, you know, very versatile as far as how we're able to configure it for whether it's a contract city or one of our patrol sectors. Okay. Some examples. I want to give some examples. I'm really excited about these. We had a disturbance call. The deputy self-dispatched, and they were able to arrive in 1 minute and 13 seconds. It wasn't even dispatched, just like Don gave some examples. It wasn't even dispatched to the comm center yet. They're arriving on scene and they're giving the information. Hey, this is the call I had. I'm arriving on scene. And they were able to intervene before any other additional crimes were able to be committed. Hit and run investigations is one of our shining stars as far as being able to see a vast improvement with the use of Live911. Typically, we have what I like to call the daisy chain. The caller gives the information to the call taker gives it to the dispatcher gives it to the deputy, and then we're waiting on updates, or the deputy's asking a question, and then we have to go back through this chain. There's too many cogs in the wheel, as they say. We have been able to, so far, just to my knowledge, at least catch 4 hit and run suspects with Live911, because we're hearing the information just as the reportee says it. We're able to get there. We're able to kind of, you know, determine where they're going. We've even had one reportee who was able to follow the suspect as they abandoned the vehicle, saw them going to the store. The deputy heard that. They were able to immediately respond to that store and locate suspects before they were able to take off. far as serious crimes, and not that hit and runs aren't serious crimes, but we were able to, we couldn't stop a homicide, but as soon as the 911 call came in one of our contract cities of Dundee, the contract deputy that was assigned to the city heard the call come in on 911, was able to respond to the location again before he was even dispatched, and because of his quick arrival, not only did we have the suspect still on scene, but we had a witness that was trying to leave that we probably would have never located afterwards. And we were able to recover the firearm that the suspect had just hidden, but found out that they were going to go back and try to move it again. So we were able to, pretty much get the suspect, get the witness, get the evidence, but not for Live911, we probably would have lost all that. We also had, and we're going to go to another screen here in just a second, if we'll go to the next slide, where we had a deputy sheriff who was patrolling. You'll see it here on the screen on the right. It says JM 5034. That's actually one of our supervisors. And he was patrolling in the area when we had a disturbance call go out. Now, he was heading the opposite direction to another call when this Live911 call came out. And this woman was screaming, her boyfriend was attacking her. And as you can see to the screen to the left, you can follow, kind of the path where she was running back and forth trying to get away from this guy. You can see the different cell phone pings there. And he was able to turn around and get on scene within minutes, again, before being dispatched through conventional means, and was able to locate the suspect, take him into custody, and keep her from being injured. We arrested him for domestic violence. He was able to be taken to jail. We've had some more. We've had a house fire where our deputies arrived before the fire department. They were actually able to run into the garage, put the fire out. They were able to reduce property damage. We had a suicidal call where a woman unfortunately tried to take her life. She was depressed. She shot herself in the chest. Our deputies arrived in 6 minutes, again, before the fire department, administered CPR, first aid, and saved her life. She was able to recover after a gunshot wound to the chest. Luckily she was a bad shot or whatever it was, or because they were able to get there so quickly that they were able to save her life. And this is also going to be used in criminal cases. In the state of Florida, we have certain misdemeanors have to be observed by the officer. We've been able to use Live911 twice now in cases where somebody's misused 911 to call in false emergencies. And we've actually been able to have the deputies listen, hear the person calling in on 911, misuse it, and then arrive on scene and take them into custody. So it's helped on so many aspects of this. So next slide. So implementation, the biggest curveball we were thrown is we were transitioning between Windows 7 and Windows 10. This actually helped us because we were able to further the implementation at a higher rate, and we were able to push Windows 10 through on most of our laptops. Besides that, Higher Ground and Live911 has a great training PowerPoint that they were able to put out to our folks. I've actually even created a tutorial for my people that I've pushed out just to help them with some of the fine tuning of the settings, depending on what geofence or georadius they want. Nighttime settings, daytime settings, volume control, all of those aspects. The great thing about it is, we've also set policies. We've written policies in where when Live911 has to be used, when it can't be used. Obviously, we don't want, because of sensitive information such as HIPAA on some of the medical calls, we've instructed the deputies. If you determine it's a medical call where, not like where an AED needs to respond, but somebody's having another medical issue that law enforcement really can't help with, we dismiss the call. So they're not listening to that. They all sign memorandums of understanding, understanding they're going to hear sensitive information, and they understand that, when they leave their car, because right now it's based off the laptop in the car, the MDT, they mute the system so that nobody else is hearing that sensitive information come out. I can't agree with Don more that, as we educate the dispatchers and the public, is that we are literally telling them, listen, the deputies are listening right now. They're hearing you. Tell them what you need to say. Get it out there. They're responding. This is going to help them gauge their response. I would agree that it is, game-changing technology. Again, without being inside the car or being inside the comm center and listening to this, there's no faster way for you to get the information. And it's not as Don was talking about in Fritz, it's not a them and us when it comes to dispatchers. We've actually had, the deputies on scene or deputies in the field go, I have a higher respect now for the dispatchers than I ever did, because they're hearing all the calls that are coming in. They're hearing the people screaming and cussing at them and all these other things that are going on. They're like, I had no idea. It's like they flipped a switch. They understand what's going on now, in the comm center, and they do have that respect. It's also, we're working as a team. Coming into work this morning, I had a guy come in. It was a real abrupt 911 hang up, and the dispatcher put in the screen that I believe he said this, and then I caught on the radio and I was like, I believe he said he had a person in the house, and they went back and checked the tape, and it was, once they were able to play it a couple of times, it was, and so we were able to get a more adequate response, multiple units for a possible burglary, where before it might not have been. So I mean, it's really helped out with the team effort as far as getting more better information out to folks. So, but Aaron, do we have time for the whiteboard or for the case study?
I think we do here. Let me go ahead and play that video for everybody.
When you look at our department right now and you look at what we've done with technology, it is groundbreaking. And prior to Live911, we would have officers that would receive a radio call from dispatch, and they'd provide them with the information, and they do an amazing job. But what happens is sometimes you don't get all the information. And that is where this is critical.
We want well-informed first responders. We want them to understand what they're going to. We want them to be thinking about what they might do before they get there, because time is never on a first responder's side, and anything you can do to get a jump on that, I think definitely will save lives.
With Live911, my officers have the ability now to hear a live feed of the actual 911 call, and then they can hear the details that sometimes might be left out. What this means to the community is if an officer has the ability to get there quicker, and your family member or you are in a situation where it's potentially life or death, will 30 seconds make a difference to you?
The concept of Live911 came from Fritz Reber, who was a retired captain from the Chula Vista Police Department. So after it was explained to us, we were like, this is amazing. This is something we really need to do.
When you get that call, the dispatcher's entering as fast as she can with a keyboard. I'm actually hearing what's going on. So it takes a few minutes for them to get it to me, and I already know what I'm looking at as I'm driving to the call. So here comes the 911 call. So it's right up here.
They can look on Live911 and see exactly where that caller is standing and drive directly to that location without delay.
I think that it bridged a gap and created more cohesion between patrol and dispatch, because they have a clear understanding of what the dispatchers are doing, and they understand that they're doing everything they can to get as much information as they can, as fast as they can. It is reassuring to the citizens so that they know that the officer is actually listening. If there's something, before they would just say, send the police. And now it's like, well, the officer can hear you, he's responding. So the more information you give me, he can catch the bad guy. And then they're a little bit more receptive to give the information.
I got flagged down at call 235 Woodlawn.
Higher Ground is announcing general availability of the Live911 product. It is available nationwide to be installed in every police department, small, medium, or large.
It's beyond a game changer. We have to give our officers, our first responders, more information. And that is critical right now as we talk about de-escalation and we talk about the challenges law enforcement is facing. This is an opportunity to help officers have more information, to make better informed decisions, to get there quicker, and to save people's lives.
Okay, thanks. I guess, do we have some time for a question and answer?
We do. Thank you guys so much. This is just fascinating technology, and I just love how it seems to close that loop and connect the citizens straight to the officers. It's just an incredibly empowering resource. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And folks, if you're like me and you like this webinar, then be sure to check out our incredible lineup of webinars on our law enforcement feature page, where you'll find another webinar I think you'll find fascinating. Join us on November 17th, when we'll be talking about how 911 and suicide lifelines can work together more effectively. So if that topic is of interest to you or your agency, all you need to do is go to the justiceclearinghouse.com website, go to the navigation button called Featured, and then drop down to Law Enforcement. And there you'll find an incredible array of webinars on a whole range of topics that have been scheduled for you throughout the rest of 2020 and yeah, well into 2021 too. So take some time, check those out. We'd love to have you join us. Folks, we do have a number of questions from the audience today. And so just in case I don't get to your particular question, don't forget to jot down Fritz and Don and Greg's emails there on the screen. I'm sure they'd love to take your questions and get back to you and explain their situations and how they've been able to use this technology. Guys, we do have a number of questions if you're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the first question, I'm not sure, this might be more for Fritz. Daniel wanted to know, is text to 911 also incorporated into Live 911?
Not yet. So right now you just have the GPS location of the call and on the map, as well as the audio from the caller. Don, actually, I don't know, you might know more in terms of whether that's on the roadmap and some of the hurdles or value add that might have.
Yeah, it is on the roadmap, from my understanding from higher ground, but we're just not there yet with the text to 911. But we are aware that it's coming.
Fantastic, thank you.
Add to that, that the map feature with the incoming information is a perfect portal to layer on additional features down the road. Much like all software, it improves over time. It's obviously a great product today, but it'll be much better as developments come in. So text, shot spotter technology, other type of alarms or alerts, all can be pushed through that portal so that officers get that information in real time.
Excellent, thank you. Next question, as I think you guys saw from our polling question as we kicked off today's webinar, we have a number of folks from outside the US, including Canada, and one of our audience members is asking, is this available in Canada?
I don't know if
that's a really good question.
Yeah, Tom, we have somebody from higher ground. Tom, would you be able to answer that?
Yes, I can, and yes, it is.
Outstanding, thank you, fantastic. Next question, Latoya, I'm sorry, Tom, did you want to? Okay, never mind, sorry. Okay, so Latanya wanted to know, do officers have the ability to access a Live 911 call to a call that they've been dispatched on that may be outside their geographic fence? I think I phrased that correctly.
You can take it on if you want, but I know from our experiences, as long as the call is active, if they expand their geofence, as long as the call is active, we're able to pick that call back up and listen to it. The whole key is the caller still on the line?
Yeah, exactly. And then so each user has the ability to customize their preferences on their geofence, how big of a geofence, how small of a geofence. They can also have calls pop up on the map, but not start live streaming. So there's a number of different ways for the individual user to customize it just for that purpose.
Very good, thank you. Rico wanted to know, is this technology unique to higher ground?
We're not sure who's taking it. Go ahead, Tom.
Tom,
yes, I'll answer that. Yes, it is. To date, it is unique to higher ground. We are in the process of submitting a patent for the technology, and how we're doing it is a software use case. But yes, currently higher ground's the only company that has this.
Excellent, thank you. Next question, John wanted to know, can you replay the 911 Live 911 call at a slower speed to maybe be able to understand the person more clearly?
You do have a playback feature. That's what I did this morning with the example I gave. Is I was actually able to play it back in the car, take it back to the beginning, and that's where I had heard that the guy said he had a person in the house, not how it was originally heard. So you do actually have that feature. As far as slowing it down speed-wise, I haven't run into that yet, but I know you can play it back.
Yeah, I agree.
Fantastic, thank you. Cal wanted to know, if the dispatcher is working a radio position, are they able to see an overview of all calls and the location of the units?
Yeah, so I'll jump on that. So that was one of the benefits of why the dispatchers are using it. And I know our dispatch supervisors specifically like it because they can drop into a call and overhear another dispatcher listening to them. But when they do that, it ties up their phone line. And with Live911, they're able to kind of click on if there's multiple 911 calls coming in. Maybe you have that traffic collision in an intersection. You see 5 or 6 911 calls cluster on a map immediately that show all in that location. But maybe you see another one that's an outlier in a different part of the city. You can click on that 911 call to hear directly that call. So you can kind of pick and choose and see what the different resources are going to need. And it's the same with our supervisors and our watch commanders can kind of pick and choose which ones they want to look at. And I'm not sure if I answered the question on that or not.
I think you did, but I'm sure the audience member will get back to us and let us know if you didn't.
Okay.
So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Christopher asked, are you saying that this only works if your call taking system and or CAD system is integrated with Rapid SOS as opposed to using Rapid SOS via the SOS portal?
Tom, you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, so we found they can use the Rapid SOS portal. What we found was by actually having Live911 query Rapid SOS, we can get that information, the location information faster onto the map. Additionally, we can have things like area of uncertainty. There's other Rapid SOS information that is available, and it actually displays on the map so that the first responder gets the information immediately, as opposed to having to go through a secondary clicking to go through the Rapid SOS portal.
Got it. Thank you. Next question. Marla wanted to know, what if multiple 911 calls are coming in from the same area or the geofence radius, but regarding entirely different emergencies? How do you filter the non-emergency 911 calls that are also placed on placed to 911?
Oh, I'll jump on this one. So Live911 does not change any operating procedures for dispatch. Dispatchers, however that handles for the current, your current method of calls coming in, nothing changes with that. This is just a portal for the first responder out in the field to eavesdrop into the different calls for service. So they can pick and choose, but the first responder has no control whatsoever on how a dispatcher clears that call, answers that call. That still remains completely in control of the dispatch center.
Got it. Thank you. Next question. So Don, to your point, it lets the officer pick and choose a little bit. How do you make sure that everybody doesn't pick the hottest call and everybody only respond to the one call that they want to respond, and that all of these calls are taken care of?
So again, this does not change how a officer is dispatched. Now we recognize an officer could hear a 911 call and self-dispatch to a call, not knowing there is another call that's pending. So this is just like an officer, does a self-initiated activity, starts to do make a traffic stop or something. When a dispatcher comes on the air and says, "I've got a pending hot call for you to go. You need to break." That doesn't change. So I just want to make it clear that how dispatch currently operates, it remains the same. We really have had our officers and our supervisors work very closely with our dispatchers. There's it's a huge learning curve. What is very interesting is our officers never knew what the dispatchers do. I mean, they knew they take calls for service and everything, but they didn't recognize the challenges that our dispatchers have because the officers never hear it. So those, when the officer would get on the air and ask, okay, what direction of travel is that car going? What color is the car? And they start rapidly asking all of these questions on a hot call that's coming out. Now they're hearing the dispatcher asking every question already of the caller, but maybe the caller doesn't know, they're vague or something of that nature. So what we found, it has really limited the airtime. It's reduced the amount of airtime radio traffic that we've had, and a better connection with the officers. The officers arriving on scene and are protecting our dispatchers, and that they'll hear the way a caller talks to our dispatcher, maybe not in a polite manner, and the officer has to explain to the caller that our dispatchers have to ask these questions for this reason, and please do not curse out our dispatchers. We don't like that. It doesn't, it doesn't help the situation, and we want to remain professional in everything that we do.
Got it. Thank you.
I'd like to add a little bit to that.
Oh, you bet.
If I could. So, before Live911, when you drive around and you didn't get the information you wanted, you were very frustrated, and officers would naturally just sort of blame the messenger. And so any misunderstanding, any conflicts between dispatch and officers in the past seem to resonate from this misunderstanding. And inevitably, you're thinking that dispatchers aren't doing enough to get you the information. Listening to the incoming 911 call, realizing that the reason you're not getting information is probably a caller who's, not cooperative, under the influence, a lot of background noise, a million different reasons. Hear all the questions being asked, and so you're not having to ask them over the air. It really clears up, and the blame ends up where it lies. And dispatchers and police officers, I think, see things and realize that there's a lot of reasons that they weren't getting the information out of the caller, and none of it was the dispatcher's fault.
Oh, what a great insight. Thank you for sharing that. To piggyback on that, Jesse was wanting to know, can officers, so the officers can hear the call, obviously, can they ask the caller additional questions, or do they need to funnel that question to the dispatcher to ask?
I can take that one. It's one-way communication. I mean, basically you can hear, but you're still relying on dispatch to the call taker to get those questions. So it's cutting down on some of the daisy chain, but again, you can hear the information that's coming out, but yeah, you still have to go through the dispatch.
And what to add to that, we've had officers who will come out on the air and say, "I'm monitoring Live911. Can you ask the caller this question?" Specific. Yes. So they just start it with because the dispatcher may not know what they're talking about because they're not the call taker. So the officer says, "I'm monitoring Live911. Can you ask the caller on Broadway if the person is, carrying a backpack?" And so they're relaying that and hearing it in real time.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. Sam wanted to know, has this been or can this be deployed for fire, EMS, etc.?
So I'll take this. So it's, being a cop, it was pretty intuitive of how to integrate it into operations, police operations. And through the DFR program, we had firefighters in the drone room, and they loved getting the information, and they would get all the medical information and have an idea what to do as soon as their rig arrived. We haven't really figured out a way to integrate it into everyday fire operations. They just are dispatched differently. They're not driving around waiting for the next call. A lot of them, go in and out of different districts. So, we're still looking at that, but those operations aren't as clear as the law enforcement, police, and deputy use case.
Got it. Thank you. Christy wanted to know, what kind of financial impact did this have on the budget? So, for example, does Live911 need electronic storage, or is it only live and not kept outside of CAD? What's the financial impacts? I think a lot of agencies remember body-worn cameras and having to store that video and such. And she was wondering that same question.
Tom, do you want to jump on the requirements?
Yeah. So Live911 is designed to be a live streaming application. We do retain the information for a period of time, so as Greg pointed out, to be able to do some playback, but it's not part of a long-term storage. It doesn't change the need for the call recording and logging system. It does require a server for in the PSAP itself, for the purpose of being able to capture the audio, as well as the ALI and ANI information, as well as the Rapid SOS information. But that server can be a VM on an existing server network. It doesn't have to be overly large. Then there is the web application that would actually sit on the MDC. From a auxiliary cost point of view, it's not that high.
Got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Fritz, you talked about how you came up with the idea for Live911 and that as a cop, you would hear details in the call that sometimes weren't being shared. Can you give some examples of those kinds of details that maybe just intuitively cops would hear in those callers' voices and such that helped as you approached the call for service?
Certainly the tone of voice and how serious and urgent it was helpful. How time sensitive it was. Was this something that happened several minutes ago, or was this happening right this second? I don't have any real life examples other than just sort of scenarios where you might hear a caller saying, you know, the person's coming out, they're carrying a backpack, they just jumped into a white truck, they're taking off, going around the big tree and crossing Broadway over towards Walmart. And so that's a lot of information to put in. And so officers might hear that the person's leaving now in a white truck and not all the other facts and details that would come with the caller. And so that, and since you get that information immediately, you can look where that person's describing. And if they're saying, hey, the truck's crossing the street right now, you realize that's now. If you heard it over the radio in the old days, that the only place you knew that truck was crossing the street right then.
And I'll add to that, where we've had a lot of success is when a victim might be following a suspect and given their turn-by-turn location. So when they're saying, I'm turning right on Broadway, the call taker enters it into CAD, it gets routed over to the dispatcher puts they're turning right on Broadway. Well, since then, they've made 2 more left turns because there's that delay, where we found that the officers who are monitoring the ongoing 911, they're able to immediately catch up to the callers because it's in real time and they can see their location on the map.
And just adding on to Don and Fritz, you know, whenever you think about reading a book, you know, if you're reading a CAD screen or even the dispatcher's reading a CAD screen from the call taker, you're putting your own inflections, your own interpretations on it. When you can hear that reportee telling it in their voice, you know, the urgency, the real facts coming in, you're not having to imagine what's going on, you hear what's going on.
Fantastic. Thank you. And folks, we have time for just one more question today. And the last question of the day goes to both Tony and Brian because they kind of are asking the same general idea. So in terms of the metrics, so how has Live911 changed, Greg, you and Don's operations? What are some of those metrics or benchmarks that you've noticed after implementing Live911? Are people getting to situations, you know, X% sooner? Are they able to de-escalate situations more effectively? What are some more of those specific pieces of data in terms of how you've seen this technology transform your agencies?
I'll let Don start.
Okay. We are actually working with Higher Ground to try and get that statistical information. How do we quantify it and actually show? We've got a lot of examples and we feel like it's helping. For our priority 1 response times, we are this year for the first time in 6 or 7 years are now going to meet our response times parameters, which is pretty incredible. And our priority 2, we're still not meeting it, but we've taken off a couple of minutes on our response times to meet that priority 2. We believe it is in direct response to Live911, but we got to make sure that we quantitative. We can't directly tie it to them. But we have a number of examples of officers arriving on scene, and it was interesting when we first rolled this out. Our dispatchers were all talking, and they knew about Live911, but they couldn't understand how officers were when they dispatch a call. The officer said, "Yeah, I'm already here," and they were like, "How did they even know there was a call?" They just thought maybe it was just, you know, they were lucky to get there at the exact same time, and now they know that that's not the case, that the officers are monitoring and are starting to roll that way. And a couple of the officers have told me directly that they have to sometimes slow down and maintain officer safety. You know, they hear it, it's right down the street. They want to go out and help, but they maintain the officer safety. And sometimes they just have to park and wait for their backup unit to get there and roll in there. But in the meantime, they're copying and listening to the Live911. Go ahead, Greg.
No, I totally agree with Don, and it is, you know, how do you quantify, especially if, you know, you're dispatch yourself before the call actually gets there, and then, you know, we're having to revisit how we, record those. Usually when a call comes in, when it gets dispatched, when the unit goes en route. We're having to relook at those features. But I kind of measure our success and our benchmarks in the customer service and how everybody's when we arrive on scene. I mean, when we beat the fire department, when we beat EMS, and they're used to it being the other way around, they're like, wow, something's changed. You guys, and as large as our jurisdiction is, that always happens. You've got more fire stations closer than you have deputies in the districts, and it's really turned around. So I've really seen it improve.
Oh, that's fantastic. Guys, thank you so much again for your presentation today. And folks, if I didn't get to your question, I know Daniel, Robert, Alana, Susan, too many to count, Nick, Ellen, I know you all were chiming in there and asking a ton of questions. I am so sorry I wasn't able to get to everybody's questions today, but again, jot down the speakers' emails there on your screen, send them a note.
Please.
I'm sure they'll be happy to get back to you and answer any questions in terms of how it's worked for them, jurisdictions, issues of virality, that kind of thing. I'm sure they'll be able to get back to you and answer those questions for you. And folks, be sure to join us right back here tomorrow when we'll be talking about co-responder programs, the keys to successful implementation. So be sure to join us, or have somebody from your organization or agency join us if you can. And with that, this concludes today's Justice Clearinghouse webinar. Have a super rest of your day, everybody, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye now.